Human Impact on the Rhinoceros Species Population by Ngai. Rhinoceros species background. The rhinoceros species have roamed this planet for about 50 million years, since their first appearance during the Earth's warm period, or the Eocene period. The Parasaurolotherium, the first rhino ancestor, first appeared after the extinction of the dinosaurs and later evolved from the ancient species to the rhinoceros species we know today. And here are some pictures of the rhino's first ancestor. The rhinoceros species are all herbivores, and the type of vegetation they eat varies from species to species. The vegetation the rhinos usually eat include leaves, fruit, and grasses, and sometimes branches. Depending on the type of vegetation the species eats will determine the shape of the rhino's snout. Rhinoceros are very large in size, with the largest rhino, the white rhino, growing to be about 13 feet tall and 6 feet wide. The smallest rhino, the Sumatran rhino, can grow up to about 10 feet tall and 4.8 feet wide. The rhinoceros species usually has a grayish color and are most known for their horns. Rhinoceros use their horns for defending territory, protecting their young, and foraging. Rhinoceros females have a long gestation period that lasts for about a year and a half and will only reproduce every 2 to 5 years. This long gestation period will only produce one offspring, which will be raised by their mothers until they are about 3 years old. They also do not have contact with their fathers, and their fathers are not involved in the raising of young rhinos. Here is a rhino eating a branch, and here is a rhinoceros mother and its baby playing and running around. The rhinoceros species. There are about 5 known species of rhinoceros: the white rhinos, the black rhinos, the Javan rhinos, the Sumatran rhino, and the greater one-horned rhino. There are about 11 subspecies of rhinos as well. Today, the species can be found in parts of Asia and Africa in grasslands, floodplains, swamps, and rainforests. The Javan, Sumatran, and greater one-horned rhinoceros are found in Asia, while the white and black rhinos are found in the African continent. Here is a Javan rhino, and there are about 74 left on the earth. Here is a Sumatran rhino, and they have a less than 80 population. There are about 5,300 to 5,600 black rhino population. There's about 3,500 greater one-horned rhinos left. And here is the white rhino, also known as the biggest rhino. And there is about 20,000 white rhino left on the planet. Rhinoceros importance. The rhino's foraging behavior contributes greatly to their environment landscape, making them a very important part of the Earth's ecosystem. The rhinoceros can be considered a keystone species because if the rhinoceros populations are thriving, smaller species that live in the same ecosystem as the rhinos will ultimately thrive as well. The rhinoceros species are very crucial to their environment because they are major land grazers and help shape the landscape of their habitat, which not only benefits them, but also the other animals that live in the same habitat with them. The rhinoceros also help other species in their environment by digging for water and breaking branches. By foraging, the rhinos help to provide other species they live with water in hot climate landscapes where water may not be readily available, and help them to get food more easily from the branches they break down and the roots they dig up. The rhinos are very important to the biodiversity of their environment because they also assist with the distribution of seeds through their dung, which is one of the many ways they help to shape the landscape. The rhinoceros can also help humans and be used as tourist attractions, which would bring in a lot of revenue for local people in a way that does not lead to the extinction of the species like poaching will. The direct protection of the rhinoceros species will help to provide a source of income for locals and indirectly help protect the other species in the environment. Here we have a rhino digging for water or roots. Threats to the rhinoceros population. The first one is poaching. Poaching rhinos first began about 150 years ago when rhinos began to be hunted for sport. During the 1970s and the 1980s, the rhinos started to be coveted for their horns as they were believed to have medicinal properties in many traditional Asian medicinal practices. The horns of the rhinos were thought to be able to cure cancer and other ailments like arthritis and gout, when in reality, the rhinoceros horn is made up of keratin, which is the same protein in human hair and nails. It is also made up of melanin and calcium. Climate change. Climate change will also affect the rhinos because it will create an environment that will ultimately be too hot for crops and vegetation to grow, which will lead to a decline in nutrition for rhinoceros. If the rhinos are malnourished, they will be less likely to reproduce viable offspring that will later help to increase the population. An increase in temperature will also decrease rainfall in rhino habitats, which will lead to drought and rhinos dying because of dehydration and overheating. Human disturbances. The rhinos need lots of space in order to graze and have a successful population. But because of human disturbance, the rhinos are losing the once large amounts of land they used to inhabit. Human disturbances that cause the destruction and loss of habitat include land management practices and human settlement on these lands that the rhinos used to call home. Here we have a rhino who was actually lucky that his whole horn was not cut out of his skull like I've seen other rhinos who have been poached. Here we have drought and bare South African land that I don't think many species would be able to survive in. And here is industrialization that is occurring in Africa that's taking up a lot of land that rhinos and other species used to graze. Rhinoceros conservation success. Nepal was able to successfully protect the greater one-horned rhino species with the Indian government by implementing strict enforcement of laws and involving themselves in local communities near the rhinoceros species. Nepal increased the harshness of penalties imposed on poachers and granted the rhino park authorities the power to implement fines and arrest those who want to try and hunt the species. This showed that cooperation between government and wildlife conservationists is so important and crucial to protecting endangered species. Nepal also created organizations that would help keep track of poaching information, smugglers, and would help determine punishments for wildlife criminals. These organizations were called the National Wildlife Crime Control Coordination Committee and the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. These organizations were key in helping to uncover wildlife criminal activities and help enforce Nepal's National Parks and Wildlife Conservation Act. Here we have a group of rhinos in the water. You can also see there's a baby rhino there. And here we have another mother rhinoceros with her baby. What to do to prevent rhino extinction? Stricter laws must be implemented globally in order to help the species get back to population numbers that are not just above numbers that would be considered endangered. More law enforcement must be used in conjunction with stricter laws that are implemented to protect rhino populations. Governments around the world must also monitor the illegal trade of resources produced from the vulnerable rhino species. Humans must also look for ways that they can use natural resources for the longest amount of time without destroying the environment. Ways that humans can help contribute to the protection of the rhinoceros would be to use more sustainable products that were made by companies that limit illegal logging and forest conversion. If consumers start to demand more sustainable products, more companies will start to provide products that are sustainable. In order to get more communities to help with the conservation of the rhinoceros species, more education about the species must be made more readily available to the public. With more education, humans will be able to understand the importance of the rhinoceros and why they must be protected. Education of the rhinoceros species can also lead to people making donations in order to help wildlife protection organizations fund the conservation of the species. Donations can be used to provide more park rangers to scope and protect rhinoceros lands, which will help to further protect the species from poachers infiltrating and killing the animals. Humans must collectively work together to reverse the damages we've done to the earth.